Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Macabre Derek here with another RPG rant, answering three questions from Chad the Potato. Yeah, you know who you are, Chad. Don't think that I forgot. Anyway, long story short, Chad is taking the reins of a RPG group that he's been involved with, led to believe for quite some time. Long story short, GM ended up hitting burnout. It's unfortunate, but congratulations, Mr. Potato. You've just ended up getting hit in one of the thickest jobs you will ever be involved. And here's why. A lot of people end up making especially in Dungeons and Dragons, which is the format that they're playing, 3.5, potentially at 5th, but quite frankly, you can play an RPG with Jenga blocks if you wanted to. Here's the key thing. He's coming into it and he's coming into it with minimal experience. He doesn't really have any set pieces to end up working with right now. So this is going to be kind of a two-parter. But this first one's going to be answering three questions. Where does he start? Particularly, I'm just going to throw up a random plot to be giving him some ideas. Do you use miniatures? That's a very simple question to answer, but I think some of the details may be lacking in a simple yes or no. So we're going to go in detail with that. And how do you do improv? Quite frankly, because if you're like me and you don't go by a script, well, then you're gonna have to end up learning how to improv, aren't you? So let's start off. Where do you start? Let's say you have a cult of necromancers, influenced by some kind of demons from the realms of chaos, somewhere in the hells. You end up putting these in a open world. Yeah. How do you end up doing this in this particular method? How do you do it without scaring your players off? Um, Here's the thing. If you're talking about a cult, what is a cult? A cult is a gathering of individuals. And cults don't always end up operating under one guide point. They don't, how do I put this? Everybody ends up thinking about these kinds of cults, and here's your ringleader, maybe a lieutenant, and everybody else is a faceless NPC. Don't make them faceless, okay? What you want to end up doing instead is have the players interact with some of these cultists without knowing that they're cultists, okay? Little Billy the blacksmith, he's a cultist, full out. You don't realize that the reason he ended up doing so is because his mother died in a very early age and he was raised without a mother figure. So maybe there's that dark part of him that he hides from the world. While he forges with steel, the cult can offer him so much more. A family, a place to end up being one of their own. He doesn't need to wield magic. He just needs to believe. He needs to be among them. And maybe they do end up taking the time to conjure up the spirit of his dead mother, right? Maybe they do something even a little bit more heinous. They entrap it within a ring that he wears. He forged this ring. Or maybe better yet, it's her wedding band that he wears on his pinky finger. She'll always be near him. Always. Haunting him. But at least it's contact with a mother he never had. But when the player characters run into him, he's just Billy. Everybody knows Billy. Maybe he's a little awkward, maybe a little bit of a social shut-in. He'd rather be working on a hammer and anvil than interacting with the customers. And maybe it's his brother who does that, and his brother has no idea that he's a cult member. Maybe they run into an old hermit at some point, somebody who's outed of town. The reason that he was outed was that he once was a grand necromancer in his own right, but stood against this cult. Give it depth, give it perspectives, give this hermit, for instance, might be in the situation where he's trying to help the PCs, but they don't realize that that's what he's doing. He's there every step of the way. He has to be, because these are the best hopes for being able to bring down this cult. The cult, on the other hand, may have absolutely no want to end up ending the player characters. They might not. Quite frankly, why would I end up spending time killing a group of adventurers when they could be so much more useful? A merchant with a sack of coin is all the motivation some mercenaries need. And they don't care what side they're fighting for, so long as you give it a good spin and end up putting them in a position where they feel like they're doing right. In reality, they are working for the cultists. Who knows? But you have to make it about the individuals. Now, you don't have to do this for every cult member, but enough sprinkled about so that they can find out on their own accord if they choose to end up looking into it. Is they may be going in with some biases. They may assume everyone in this cult is a necromancer. But somebody needs to end up doing the logistics. Somebody needs to run the wagons. Somebody needs to repair the chapel. Some people need to end up digging up the graves. You think that a necromancer is always digging up old graves to end up doing it? No, he's sometimes a withered old man with a tome of evil incantations, or maybe not so evil. And so he doesn't have the physical brute strength to end up doing it. But maybe, Billy the blacksmith, I mean, he swings a hammer all day. How much different is it for it to be a shovel? Maybe there's a few people who are involved that are in a little bit too deep. They're in over their heads and don't have a way out, right? Not until the player characters show up. This is part of creating it, and this gets into world creation. You need to be able to flesh out the world well enough. Here's one thing I find a lot of people do. They'll make a city, quote unquote, and the city will have 5 NPCs. Yeah, they'll say that there's thousands of people running around, but really you only interact with these 5. No. If you fleshed out a city is all the setting you need for 8 to 10 months of play. And the next city might move on and it may be a completely different bit. You can change it up. Now, when it comes down to that, that's world building, and I'll get to that in another video. Most could definitely. However, don't be afraid if you are going to scare them away. Use that fear. Use that as a point, because if they are not engaging, what is this cult up to? Okay, what is the ultimate purpose of this cult, especially if it is influenced by demons? Influenced means not directly in control of. The demons might have their hooks in, maybe not the leader of this cult, but maybe a few of the followers, trying to whisper into the ear to end up causing chaos throughout the land. It might end up being the case. So, what are these NPCs like? Do they come across as a true cleric of chaotic evil? Or are they a lot more crafty? Are they capable of gaining your sympathy, gaining your trust? Are they capable of leading you to great spiritual revelation? Gotta remember, not everybody's involved in this cult, but some people might. I hope that ends up giving some degree of help when it comes down to that. Second question, do you use miniatures or are you all about the mind's eye? I used to use miniatures. I don't anymore. Here's why. I play Warhammer 40K. When I'm playing Warhammer 40K, I am thinking very tactically. I am thinking of it in terms of winning. That thinking in terms of winning means you can no longer consider anything on the board as a threat to yourself. You are considering it a threat to your stat sheet. You have to reach over and move the pieces like as if you're playing a board game. You need to focus on something that is not prevalent through, well, if you play it right, probably 80% of your game. And now all of a sudden, this rules all. Make it mind's eye. Because one of the restrictive parts about, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, actually, is the dungeon. A lot of people will say, I want to design great dungeons. Well, here's the thing. A dungeon can be used once, maybe twice if you're crafty. 3 times is really pushing it. The NPCs, the world, on the other hand, that can be crafted and used over and over and over again. Because the NPCs' perspective shifts, it develops, they grow right along with the players. It's a push me pull you situation, right? So if you take the time to craft one really good dungeon and take that same time to craft one really good NPC, you're going to get more value out of your NPC. The dungeon is nothing more than a setting. You have to think of it in those terms. That's what it is. It's a setting. What is that setting trying to tell? What's the part of the story it's trying to tell? And that's a lot harder to do when you're drawing on a whiteboard with, or putting down a play mat or anything like that. You know, engage the senses, engage their understanding of the room, and let them all play out what they end up believing is true. Like, just work with it. If you really want to have some fun, make it a point of, if they picture it in their mind that this thing could conceivably be there, roll a chance die. 50-50. Is it there? Yeah. Or if it's particularly awesome and you just kind of like, I'm kind of curious to see where he's going with this. Let him have it. If he asks in a mine if there's a pickaxe nearby, yeah, sure, why not? Is there a shovel? Sure. Is there an old piece of track from the mining carts? Yeah, go for it. It's kind of underfoot, but what are you going to do with it? I'm going to beat somebody to death with it. I want to see this. This kind of thinking doesn't come to mind when you're thinking in terms of grid. In grid, with miniatures, you are thinking about your to hit, you're thinking about your damage, you're thinking about your weapon, you're thinking about your reach, you're thinking about your position, you're thinking about flanking. That's all you're thinking about. However, when you're doing it in your head, there's so much more you can do. There's a lot more options. You are very much restricted only by your imagination and what the dice will tell you. And don't stop them by trying to end up making them do something that's the most pragmatic either. Do you have any idea on how awesome it is to try and end up going into a wrestling struggle near a campfire and then suddenly have to drown that kobold face first in fire, and you can just smell it? That smell of burning hair and scale. The heat is starting to blister your own hands as he's screaming and inhaling fire, scorching the lungs, charring the lips. You can see it peeling back to reveal those teeth and gums that are becoming black, and those eyes. Yeah, down to pinpoints, as it's an excruciating agony. You're trying to end up fighting for your life, and then suddenly you realize what kind of sadism you have imparted upon this in a struggle for your own existence. You can start questioning on which one of them is the real monster at that point, which is always a fun topic for me. These situations don't happen, or at least not as frequently, if you're in a position where you're looking at a grid. Instead, describe the world. Give it depth. Give it some thought. Develop your ability to describe. And let the players use that description against anything that's in front of them. Have fun with it. Have them sip with a wine glass, shatter it, jab it into the neck of a politician they don't like, and let the consequences come as they may. And believe you me, there will be consequences if you're playing it right. These incidences do not go unpunished or unanswered. But that's the story they wanted to tell. Lastly, and on that topic, how do I prepare to be able to answer any questions or scenarios that arise during play, especially if you're not going with scripted encounters? Here's the key thing. Your NPCs and world events are happening for a reason. Okay, your NPC, let's take Billy the blacksmith, for instance. He is a part of this cult. Why is he a part of this cult? He wants to end up bringing back his dead mother. Maybe he's not quite there yet. So this is still his driving motivation. He's got to go up against the players because, quite frankly, there's just too many issues. There's too many issues where he wants to end up getting near his mother, and these player characters are going to interrupt that. They're after the cultists for whatever reason. Who knows? Maybe the cultists involve one of their family members. Maybe one of their cultists involves or got involved with a shady deal that went south with the rogue. Maybe their leader spent some time with the cleric, and the cleric is actually accidentally responsible for putting this head necromancer in this cult down the path that has led him to this. Make it personal. And if you can end up doing that and give the NPCs that they're dealing with their own motivations, let those NPCs play to their own motivations. They are not something to be killed. They are something to be that impacts the world. They are a part of the world reacting to the player characters. This is why you want to have at least 30 NPCs that are extremely well written in a city. And I usually have a list of about 20 to 30 NPCs that are just throwaway characters. If I absolutely need to end up knowing somebody, it's like, well, maybe there's Dylan. Dylan's this barkeep. It's not a big fantasy name. Of course not. He's a commoner. Oh, my name's Dylan. Right, how's it going by you? Just gotta get that nice and clean. Those kind of characters, and make them characters. Like, have some fun with it. They don't all have to be monotone. They can end up being really quiet. 1 minute, maybe they're just a little shy and not sure about themselves. Maybe they're loud and in your face. Another reason I don't play with miniatures, especially if you can get rid of the table in between. Get ready, stand up, get in somebody's face, have some fun. Make the players stand up. Maybe have some fun with that interaction. Have them grab hold of your shirt and start wringing you out because they're trying to end up getting some information out of this goblin. Who knows? Let them have that interplay, and when you have the motivations, when you understand these characters and what they're capable of doing and what they are willing to do, what lengths they're willing to go to get their goals to accomplish. Maybe they'll work beside the players one day, they'll go against them the next, and their motivations are entirely their own. Maybe they'll explain them to the player characters, maybe they won't. one of the biggest questions that always lingers is the question of why. And when that's not answered, it suddenly turns into one of those head scratchers that makes you wonder, especially if you're good at playing the clues out. You're putting them out there for people to figure out. You know, have Billy the blacksmith end up referencing his mother once or twice, during casual conversation. Maybe he was just looking at the ring when they first came in, slips it onto his pinky finger. Don't let them know anything like that. Just they interrupt. Oh, sorry. Hey, boys, how's it going? Nothing more. Just that hint that there's something more. Let them investigate on their own apparel. Let the NPCs say what they're going to say. And when it comes down to lies, sense motive, all that kind of stuff, bluff, all these kind of things, work well in the moment, but don't let them dictate the conversation. Instead, let the characters be characters. Every time you got to stop to make a dice roll should only be when the chance of failure can be just as interesting as the chance for success. Reduce your die rolls and get more into telling the story. And you've got to remember, you as the storyteller, as the GM, as the dungeon master, whatever you want to call yourself, flame tender, if you're lucky enough, you will end up taking the time to develop these characters, and you will end up having these moments where these interactions keep pace because no one's rolling die when the hint is dropped, unless they want to know. But instead, make it about the conversation, make it about the interaction. Let them know that there's more to be won by the conversation than by the die roll. And that'll end up changing your player's behavior quite quickly. I can guarantee that. So, Chad the Potato, there's the answers to your 3 questions. I'm going to end up going over world building pretty soon. We're going to start with the basics and build our way up. There's plenty of different resources out there if you need them. But hopefully, Chad, you end up finding this video helpful. And hopefully, you guys did too. If you did, give it a like. If you want to end up seeing more content, you know the deal. Click that subscribe button because it ain't going to click itself. And if you guys have an idea for any kind of video that you want me to end up doing regarding RPGs or anything else I do as a hobby, they're not limited. Feel free to drop a line. I'll get to it eventually. So, until next time.